Have you ever just stopped and stared at a simple packet of sugar sitting on your kitchen counter? I mean, it seems so innocent, right? So entirely commonplace. But behind those tiny white crystals lies a brutal, empire-toppling history that spans millennia. Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the dark progression of sweetness. We're going to trace exactly how a wild grass transformed into the most consequential and arguably destructive crop in human history. All right, let's dive right into this. 10,000. That's exactly how many years ago our story actually begins. Long before massive plantations or highly processed foods, pure sweetness was literally just a tall, thick wild grass with a fibrous stalk, growing naturally in the tropical jungles of New Guinea. Indigenous people there would simply pull it from the earth, bite into it, and taste a concentrated sweetness that no human had ever experienced before in that form. There was no refining process, no global trade networks, just people chewing on raw sugarcane for a really quick burst of energy. Section 1. The discovery of sweetness. So how did this highly localized Pacific plant begin its slow, steady crawl across early human civilizations? Well, for thousands of years, sugar basically moved at a snail's pace. It hopped island by island across Southeast Asia until about 3500 BC when it finally reached the Indian subcontinent. From there, it took another 3,000 years to reach the Greeks in 326 BC. And honestly, it wasn't until 1096 AD that European crusaders truly discovered it in the Levant. For the vast majority of human history, sugar was an exotic rarity, definitely not a pantry staple. But the real game changer? That crucial leap happened in India. Ancient Indian farmers didn't just chew the cane. They figured out how to crush it, boil the juice, and let it crystallize into this rough brown solid. They called it khanda, which, you guessed it, is exactly where our modern English word candy comes from. This brilliantly illustrates the exact moment sugar became a storable, transportable product. It completely transformed from a perishable juice into a sacred medicine routinely prescribed by ancient physicians. And this brings us to a moment of genuine cultural shock. When Alexander the Great's army rolled into India, they literally couldn't believe their eyes. One of his officers, a guy named Nearchus, famously described it as a reed that produces honey without bees. I mean, think about it. To Westerners who only knew honey, the idea of sweetness growing straight from a grass seemed impossible. Even with this incredible discovery, sugar remained astronomically expensive. In Rome and medieval Europe, it was a medicine sold in tiny, tiny quantities. Later on, Venice built a highly profitable monopoly on the trade, selling it at staggering markups. Kings proudly displayed it as a status symbol, and apothecaries would literally lock it up right next to the opium. Section 2. The blood of plantations. As European demand absolutely skyrocketed, the insatiable desire for this sweet commodity birthed a catastrophic system of human exploitation. You see, you can't just grow sugarcane in Europe. The climate absolutely won't allow it. So Portugal began experimenting with early Atlantic island colonies, and they quickly discovered that sugar cultivation requires backbreaking, horrifying labor. When Columbus brought cane to the Caribbean in 1492, the true nightmare began. The reality on the ground was hellish, enslaved workers enduring 18 to 20-hour shifts in sweltering tropical heat. They had to feed stalks into these massive, unforgiving rollers where trapped limbs frequently had to be severed with hatchets just to prevent a whole body from being pulled in. And after that came the boiling houses, suffocating windowless rooms reaching temperatures well above 140 degrees Fahrenheit. 7 years. I really want you to pause and let that devastating statistic sink in for a second. 7 years was the average life expectancy of an enslaved person upon arriving at a Caribbean sugar plantation. The plantation owners made the cold, brutal calculation that it was actually cheaper to work human beings to death and just buy replacements than to provide even baseline humane living conditions. Sugar became the massive economic engine that made the transatlantic slave trade profoundly profitable, claiming a huge portion of the 12 million enslaved Africans violently forced across the ocean. But a system this ruthless eventually reaches a breaking point. In 1791, on the French colony of Saint-Domingue, enslaved workers rose up. They launched the only successful large-scale slave revolt in human history, burning the sugar plantations to the ground and eventually creating the Free Republic of Haiti. The ripple effect here is absolutely crucial to understand. This uprising completely stripped Napoleon of his dreams for a massive sugar empire in the Americas. Without the massive revenue pouring in from Haiti's sugar, he was backed into a corner and forced to sell the Louisiana territory to the United States for just $15 million. That's about 4 cents an acre. The collapse of his sugar empire literally doubled the size of the U.S. overnight. Section 3. Fueling the Industrial World. So now we're transitioning away from the tropical colonies and moving right into the smoggy industrial era. Following the Haitian Revolution, Napoleon was stuck. The British Royal Navy had completely blockaded French ports, cutting off all that Caribbean cane sugar. So what did he do? He heavily funded a domestic alternative, the sugar beet. Suddenly, the centuries-old monopoly of tropical cane sugar, which was built entirely on enslaved labor, was directly challenged by European beet sugar grown on local domestic farms. This fierce botanical competition drove global prices down to unprecedented rock-bottom levels. For the first time ever, sugar was cheap. And cheap sugar soon found its absolute perfect partner, bitter tea imported from China. The British government actually went out of its way to lower tariffs on sugar specifically to keep it affordable for the working class. Why? Well, because cheap, heavily sweetened tea and jam sandwiches provided incredibly fast calories. Industrialists quickly realized that loading their workers up with sugar kept them moving rapidly through grueling 12 to 14-hour factory shifts without the added expense of providing real substantial meals. Almost overnight, sugar transitioned from being an elite luxury to the required, unofficial fuel of the Industrial Revolution. Let's fast forward a bit through the 20th century. We're skipping past the creation of Coca-Cola, candy bars, and all those frosted cereals to arrive at this genuinely shocking number, 100 pounds. By 1970, thanks to mass commercialization, the average American was eating roughly 100 pounds of sugar annually. To put that into perspective, that is roughly the weight of a large dog consumed in pure, refined sugar by a single person every single year. Section 4. The Great Scientific Cover-Up. This is where we need to examine the modern food industry's dark deception regarding public health. Back in 2016, researchers at the University of California, San Francisco, uncovered a trove of internal industry documents that revealed a truly stunning manipulation. In 1967, the Sugar Research Foundation paid 3 prominent Harvard scientists the equivalent of $50,000 in today's money. The payment? It was specifically to publish a review in the highly prestigious New England Journal of Medicine that intentionally downplayed sugar's role in heart disease and instead placed the blame almost entirely on dietary fat. They essentially utilized what's known as the tobacco playbook: create doubt, fund friendly research, aggressively attack your critics, and desperately delay regulation. Because of this manipulated science, the entire low-fat dietary craze was born. And here's the catch. When food companies removed fat from their products, the food literally tasted like cardboard. So to fix the flavor profile, they pumped those so-called low-fat products full of sugar, unknowingly sparking a widespread obesity and metabolic crisis. And while all that critical research was being buried, a new, highly stealthy ingredient was introduced: high-fructose corn syrup. Developed in the 1970s from heavily subsidized corn, it was significantly cheaper and much easier to blend into liquids than traditional cane sugar. In 1984, both Coke and Pepsi quietly made the switch here in the U.S. By the time the 1990s rolled around, high-fructose corn syrup had replaced cane sugar in almost every processed food on the shelf, making it ubiquitous, incredibly cheap, and notoriously hard for the everyday consumer to even track. Section 5. The Modern Sugar Epidemic. So what are the modern health consequences of this unchecked 10,000-year escalation? The American Heart Association recommends a pretty strict limit on daily added sugar, 6 teaspoons for women and 9 for men. But the actual modern U.S. average? It's a staggering 17 teaspoons per day. We are easily consuming double to triple the recommended limits, largely because sugar hides deceptively in everyday savory items where you absolutely wouldn't expect it. Things like pasta sauce, sandwich bread, salad dressings, and even your morning yogurt. The public health data we can pull from the sources is just stark. Right now, over 42% of U.S. adults are classified as obese. 37 million Americans are living with diabetes, and another 96 million are pre-diabetic. On a global scale, we are producing a massive 180 million tons of sugar every single year. Now, it's worth noting that some places are finally starting to fight back. Mexico, the UK, and cities like Seattle and Philadelphia have implemented sugar taxes, which early research suggests actually do reduce consumption, even as the industry heavily lobbies against them. Which leaves us with this final thought. A simple wild grass from New Guinea built massive fortunes, destroyed millions of lives through brutal slavery, toppled empires, literally fueled the Industrial Revolution, and fundamentally altered global human biology. And right now, it's sitting quietly in your kitchen, it's in your cereal, your ketchup, your bread. So as you look at the sugar hiding right there in your own pantry, we have to ask, what is the true cost of sweetness today? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you next time.